the great conservative movement of America and of our time. A brush fire of freedom that's being lit all over this country. We, as an irate, tireless American populace, will overcome the few radical leftists that control the levers of power today. Joe Biden's failed economic policies has given us inflation like you can't believe, and the border is in disarray.
It's amazing how few of the people commenting on this have actually bothered to go see what's happening. Well, Congressman Andy Biggs of Arizona actually went to the border.
Biggs, where's Andy? Boy, oh boy, Andy. Here's a guy. He's tough.
Hello, everyone. Andy Biggs here from Arizona's 5th Congressional District. Welcome back for another episode of What's the Biggs Idea, our regular podcast. I have with me today one of my good friends. He's a great American national spokesman and national vice president for the Border Patrol Association, Border Patrol Council. We got to get that right. Yeah. So, he's been with the Border Patrol, almost 20 years now?
Almost 20 years.
Almost 20 years now.
Time.
And does a heck of a good job. I love him to death. He's taken me and many members of Congress down to the border. You've seen him on TV. He's probably been on TV more often than the My Pillow guy. And so it's Art Del Cueto. Great. Art, I bet you were just as happy as I was to hear that the border is secure.
Yeah, no, I was very happy to hear that, but then I looked over my shoulder and realized it was a lie. First off, thank you for having me on. Okay,
you bet.
And I know that most of the listeners and people that are watching, they know who you are, but I wanted to say a couple words about who you are.
Oh.
And I know you hate this part, but it's the truth, and people need to know you are the Border Patrol agent's best ally in Congress. No attack on all the rest of your coworkers, because I know when I say things like that, I always get a couple of calls from them saying, how about me? You're one of those individuals that I met you before you were a congressman.
That's correct.
You reached out when you were working for Arizona Senate.
Yeah.
And you wanted to know about what was going on in the border. And that was a long time. That was before Trump had even announced. So people don't know, but they need to know that you're one of those individuals that has cared about the border before it was an issue to care about the border. Anyone can come along now and say it, but you've been really meaning it for a long time.
You're saying I was cool before it was cool to be cool.
You were cool before it was cool to be cool. And we appreciate it, and I appreciate it. And you've been down to the border more times than any other congressman. Yeah. And I can even say you've been down to the border more times than some of the Border Patrol leadership themselves. And we appreciate that.
Well, absolutely. And gosh, we've had some experiences, haven't we, from coast to coast.
We've been lost an awful lot of times in that desert.
Yeah, we have. But, the National Border Patrol Council president, Brandon Judd, he's the only guy I've seen actually, as a Border Patrol agent, get a car stuck.
Several times.
Yeah, right. Okay. But I had to do that because Brandon.
Little shout out to Brandon.
Shout out to Brandon. Let him know we're thinking about him. Hey, let's watch that clip, can we? About the border czar, the vice president. Didn't she also like the tax reduction czar? But here's the border czar. She's never, outside of getting a margarita at the El Paso airport,
said that.
Yeah, let's hear what she has to say.
We're going to have 2 million people cross this border for the first time ever. You're confident this border is secure?
We have a secure border in that is a priority for any nation, including ours and our administration. But there are still a lot of problems that we are trying to fix, given the deterioration that happened over the last 4 years. We also have to put in place a law and a plan for a pathway for citizenship.
So, Art, I don't want to get you in trouble for saying this, but she's just a flat out liar.
I don't know how anyone can say that with a straight face.
Yeah.
And even if you say, well, I mean, she's saying it because she hasn't been down there, obviously. But I don't have to go to the moon to know there's no gravity there, right?
Yeah, right.
Or limited gravity, I should say. It's obvious that we're in complete chaos. It has nothing to do with the last 4 years of the last administration. Day one of this administration taking office, day one at midnight, when when the president was going to be sworn in, there was a group of over 300 that was crossing and turning themselves in at the border.
Yeah.
And since then, it's been complete chaos, and it's been horrific. And when I hear nations leaders say something like that, I think of two things. One, they're completely disconnected with what is actually happening on nations' borders, and two, it's a direct slap in the face to the men and women that are putting their lives on the line each and every day down there to save our nation.
Absolutely right. I mean, I think about, gosh, how many times I've been down there? I always ask. I'll pull some
Lost
aside.
count.
Yeah,
Lost count.
I know
That's
it's been so many times,
truth.
and I'll say, hey, how you feeling about your job? And they're like, oh man, we just want to do our job. What? And so let's just talk numbers for just a moment. Yuma sector, 2020, the total number of encounters, 8,870. This year, 340,000. 340,000, Art.
Yes.
And she's there. She has the audacity. I think, I know you're kinder than me. You said, well, she's just disconnected or whatever. I think it's a deliberate lie because they've put these policies in place because I think it's purposeful. I think they want an open border.
But you'd have to see, so the American public has to see that. They have to see how
Yeah.
bad it is. And if you're going to say there's not a problem, well, then how come you have a problem with individuals getting bused to DC?
Right.
Well, who's getting bused to DC? Apparently, it's nobody because there is no problem. So where's the issue? So that's what's upsetting when you hear people say that.
Yeah.
And when I see it each and every day, I mean, you mentioned the high numbers that are being apprehended. Those individuals are turning themselves in.
Right.
Now let's look at in Arizona, in particular. Arizona leads the entire country when it comes to gotaways. There's been over 500,000 gotaways this fiscal year alone.
In
Those 500,000
Yeah.
Across the entire border.
Yeah.
But out of those 500,000, over 160,000 are from Tucson sector alone. Gotaways.
Okay, so let's talk about gotaways because when they're turning themselves in, although I have reason to be concerned because we don't know their background anymore, right?
Correct.
But the gotaways, you don't know where they came from, what they're going to do, why they're here, where they're going.
We don't know who they are. That's the problem. So what these drug cartels continue to do is they flood one area of the border with large groups, knowing that Border Patrol agents could get distracted. They're not going to have to go to that area, do the transport, do the processing, many times hospital watches. Now, they're being removed from the line because they have to do these administrative roles.
When you say you're talking to agents.
Now you have gaps that the drug cartels purposely made those gaps by flooding one area. And here comes the individuals that, the gotaways that we don't know who they're from. They've arrested people from over 160 different countries. So we don't know of those gotaways what country they're from. They're bringing in methamphetamines. They're bringing in heroin. They're bringing in fentanyl. And I know fentanyl is a big deal. People focus on the fentanyl. Well, how about the meth and the heroin?
Yeah.
People focus on the individuals that are turning themselves in Texas and then getting released. Well, how about the gotaways? We're getting hit by so many areas and so many different times that that's what's chaotic. That by the time you start concentrating on one thing, there's this group of people that'll argue with you and say, "Well, they're not walking across." Okay, how about the drugs? How about the heroin, the meth? How about all that? How about the gotaways?
Yeah.
How about the the sex trafficking? Let's talk about all that. Oh no! We're still talking about no one's walking across the border.
Yeah, I mean, that's I think what recently from the administration they said nobody's just walking across the border. That's what the spokesperson for the White House said. Nobody's just simply walking across the border. You want to know what the irony of that is? I happened to be down in Yuma with 4 members of Congress. We just popped. I told these guys, I said, nobody's crossing the border. It's 116 degrees. It's 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock. They do this normally from 10 p.m. to 8 in the morning. This when it's dark and a little bit cooler. I said, but it's going to be hot. And you won't see anybody. You know what we see? This is a family of 3 from Russia. And they come across in Yuma, and the first words out of their mouth are, "We want asylum."
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so this administration, I believe they're deliberately lying, but I wanted to ask you again about the getaways because I think that's so important to keep track of these gotaways. You only know what you know. I mean, we don't know how many unknown gotaways. But let's say there's a big group because we see big groups of 50, 75, 100 people. What happens if there's a big group like that? How do you guys record that?
So that's a great question. This is some of the problems with the numbers of the gotaways. Obviously, the apprehensions, those are solid numbers because you're apprehending and you can count one by one as you detain people. With gotaways, it's a little bit harder. So they use different variables, sensor hits, some camera traffic, but a lot of times it's just footprints. It's counting footprints in the sand,
Yeah.
and that is what makes it so much more difficult. There could be a group of 40, but somebody will call out 20 plus.
And that's where it stops, right?
20 plus. That's what you call. So it gets documented as 20. If you don't apprehend that group, you're only going to be able to register 20 gotaways. When
So-
it could have been 60, 40.
So you took me one time down a small little town, Port of Entry, and we went. I remember this because it's like early on with you, and we're driving, and every mile there's a bag, and I said, "What's in those bags?" And you said, "Well, that's camo, and
Yep.
that's the supplies for the scouts and cartel, and it's got carpet shoes." Talk a little bit, if you wouldn't mind, about carpet shoes, about camo, about the sophistication of the equipment that the cartels use to.
So that's I like to talk about that subject because for the longest time when we'd see people with carpet shoes or with camouflage gear, that was mostly the drug smugglers because they really didn't want to get detected. At the time, the carpet shoes it was just what it sounds like. It was a square piece of carpet flipped inside out. They would fold the corners and then they would tape it around their ankle. Things have gotten more sophisticated.
Right.
Now they actually have shoes that they have pieces of carpet sewn on the bottom and they tie them on and they walk with those. So what that does, it doesn't leave a clear imprint on the dirt, on the sand or wherever they're crossing. So it gives it one, you can't count all the footprints that way that easy. And at the same time, you don't know how long it was since they crossed there. Now, the reason sometimes it's bothered me is because a lot of the smuggling organizations didn't know about that. Like you knew that the drug smugglers would use it and the human smugglers wouldn't. But there was a television show that came out, Border Wars,
Yeah.
that the agency thought was a great idea to show more transparency. And I think what that did was more significantly, it hurt the job because it let out a lot of secrets to the drug smugglers. I mean, they're not dumb. The drug smugglers are watching. They're seeing how things are done. Hence, that's why they flood one area knowing that agents are going to be rushed to that spot. And the drug cartels, they've been doing it for a long time. They don't care about politics. They don't care about a budget. They have a limitless budget,
Yeah.
especially now. They're making a killing over it. And that's it's not your mom and pop organizations. These are sophisticated individuals. They got high power rifles. They have good radio equipment. They're sophisticated in everything that they're doing. And then when you turn around and you have an administration that handcuffs the law enforcement in the United States that's trying to prevent that, and at the same time not only handcuffs them but starts moving them to areas so it creates even more gaps. The cartels and the human smuggling organizations, they're thrilled at what this country's politicians are doing
Sure.
by allowing it, and at the same time they're lining their pockets with money because this administration is failing to do right for the American public.
I saw something recently that said that the criminal cartels are making somewhere around $150 billion a year.
Well, when you start looking at the amount of people, let's just say the 2 million that have crossed, each one of them had to pay. Let's go low. Let's say they each had to pay $7,000. $7,000 times 2 million. And then you throw in the gotaways, which is obviously more. That money just keeps adding up. Before, they would cross individuals, they would charge them a certain amount of money, and that money would cover them to take them to different parts of the United States. Now, they're charging the exact same amount or even more, and all they're telling them is, you just got to turn yourself over to an immigration officer and ask for asylum. The United
Yeah.
States will take care of the rest.
I've literally talked to some of these people, and they'll say, Well, first of all, they always tell me that Biden has invited them.
Yes.
They always say that. But then you say, well, you were brought here. Why here? Well, this is where they brought me. And I said, well, how'd you know to here to cross the border here? Well, my guide told me.
Yes.
Just pointed to, there you go. So let's talk one last thing about this administration. I mean, there's just a lot to say,
Right.
but I don't want to run out of time before we get here. So you got President Biden recently said, so we're getting a lot of people, 203,000 encounters last month. And you know this, India, Russia, all over the world. But now, basically, President Biden has said we're not going to send them back to Venezuela, Cuba, or Nicaragua. Okay, there's no agreements, right, to send those back, right? So let's hear what he has to say, and then I would like you to comment on just maybe some policies that we should be enacting.
President, why is the border more overwhelmed under your watch? Mr. President, on the border, why is it more overwhelmed under your watch? On the border, why is the border more overwhelmed under your watch, Mr. President?
Because there are three countries that are there are fewer immigrants coming from Central America and from Mexico. This is a totally different circumstance. What's on my watch now is Venezuela, Cuba, and Nicaragua. And the ability to send them back to those states is not rational. You could send them back and have them, we're working with Mexico and other countries to see if we can stop the flow. But that's the difference. Thank you.
What would your administration be doing, Mr.
Looks like
President?
he's sending migrants to Delaware. Do you have any comment or response to that, sir?
He should come visit. We have a beautiful shoreline.
Coming up to Delaware. So are Cuba, Nicaragua, and Venezuela our biggest problems right now on the border?
I think it's a combination of everything, but when you're seeing people from 160 different countries,
Yeah.
I think you need to concentrate on the border as a whole and not just three countries, those that you mentioned. I am more worried as somebody that grew up on the border. I was born on the border. I grew up on the border. I was raised on the border. I live on the border. I worked on the border my entire life. I am a lot more worried for the future of this country by the gotaways.
Me too.
And the unknown, that you don't know what country they're from. And take, for instance, during the Obama administration, and you were very much aware of it, the unaccompanied juveniles,
Right.
many of which were 16 and 17 years old,
Right.
but they were considered unaccompanied juveniles. And one of which recently, now during this administration that I encountered, said, "I'm here because your president said I could be here and there's nothing you can do about it." That was a 12-year-old. But back during the Obama administration, getting back to those unaccompanied juveniles, those are all now adults.
Right.
Where are they? No one seems to be able to answer that. So the millions that have been coming under this administration, and the God knows how many we're going to end up with in the millions of the gotaways, this is something that's going to hurt this country for many years to come. I stress on the American public that midterms are very important, but they need to be patient, because at the end of the day, midterms aren't going to mean as much as what it's going to mean to have somebody in that White House that actually cares. And the drug dealers, the people smugglers, the drug traffickers, obviously, all those criminals that work along our borders, they do not care who they're selling fentanyl to. They don't
That's right.
care if your mom or dad voted Republican or Democrat. They just want to get the drugs across to American families. They don't care if they die. They just want money. And people need to realize that. It has nothing to do with political parties. It has to do with, you're either going to vote for individuals that care about this country and care about the future of this country. That's what's important.
Well, Art, thanks for being with me today. And I'll just say to folks, Art and the folks that work with you, man, these are heroes that need to be recognized, supported, and defended. Thanks for what you do. Pass it along that there's a lot of people here. We're definitely in the minority, but there's a lot of people here that support you guys and want to do whatever we can to bolster that. And best to your family and to your great team.
Thank you.
And
Thank
even
you.
and even to Brandon.
Yeah, even Brandon. No, thank you for the fight, Brandon. Man, he works effortlessly on time, nonstop.
Yeah.
He's nonstop.
Yes.
I don't even know how he does it half the time, but it's like you said. We've been very vocal, same as you.
Yeah.
For a long, we were vocal before it was cool to be vocal.
That's right.
And we've been under.
That's why I found you. That's how I found you.
Yeah, and we've been under investigation for being too vocal at times. And it's easy to leave the agency, retire, and all of a sudden decide to start talking.
Right.
But I think it's a real big pride in being able to speak while you're still there, so people can say, hey, I'm not scared to speak up.
Yeah. And thanks for doing what you're doing, and never stop speaking up.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.